everyone.
Yeah, that would make much more sense.
Thank you so much for being here. My name is Marilee Borden. I'm the founder of the Northborough Guide. I just want to welcome you all. Thanks for showing up tonight. I'm going to talk for just a couple minutes about why we're here and why we're doing this, and then I'm going to hand it off to our trusty facilitator. So, as many of you know, about a year ago, the Congress passed the American Rescue Plan Act, where they awarded $350 billion to towns and states across the country with a couple of purposes. The goal of the funds is to support communities in crisis, accelerate recovery, and build a bridge toward economic development. And Northborough was lucky enough to be awarded $4 million as part of this ARPA relief. In their guidance, the U.S. Treasury urged local governments to engage their constituents and communities in assessing needs and developing plans to use these payments. And towns all over Massachusetts have been doing this for the last 6 months, 9 months. They've been surveying their residents, they've been holding public forums, they've been putting together committees whose responsibility it is to decide where the funds are going to go, or to put out requests for proposals of ideas of where to spend the money. And for some reason, our town has failed to do this. It hasn't happened yet. And in fact, last week, our Board of Selectmen was presented with the recommendation to spend $2.2 million of these funds, largely designated to cover items in our capital plan. Due to the late hour in which it came up at the Board of Selectmen meeting, and at the urging of a few residents who called in, they decided to hold off on voting on the majority of these funds until next Monday. So the vote on this $2.2 million is happening this Monday. They did vote on a small portion of the funds. They appropriated $276,000 for Proctor roof drain repairs, affordable housing, Assabet fence repair, pickleball alternates, and then the Be Well Northborough program, which I want to touch on for just a minute because I suspect that's going to come up tonight. So the Be Well Northborough program, as I understand it, is a collaboration of a half dozen or so department heads in town, including the library, the rec department, police, and schools, who will be working together to put on programs that promote health and wellness in our towns. It includes mindfulness workshops at the senior center, bringing back National Night Out for the police, and the fire department providing free smoke and carbon dioxide detectors to seniors. So with a $100,000 budget that was approved for Be Well, that works out to about $10,000 to $15,000 per department. So I think that's just something we need to understand, as Be Well might be brought up tonight in discussion. So why are we here? The Northborough Guide put together this event because our town has not yet engaged residents, business owners, local nonprofit leaders, and so on, to find out what our needs and priorities are after the pandemic. And we feel it's critical that the community be involved in these conversations. So the purpose of tonight is not to vote on anything or to put forth any formal proposals. It's simply to ensure that our town is looking at all the possibilities and weighing which will ultimately have the greatest impact. Should we be investing in capital to shore up our long-term financial footing at the expense of other community needs? Are there other ways to spend the money that might have a better long-term return on investment? I don't have the answer. I don't know if any of us does. But I think all we're asking is that everything be brought to the table and weighed equally. So when the Board of Selectmen is considering the $2.2 million on Monday, have they considered all of the options for this money? So Northborough Guide will be summarizing tonight's discussion and providing it to the Board of Selectmen. However, we do have a number of them in the room tonight, and this will be recorded by cable and posted tomorrow. So I think they'll be listening with their own ears as well. And, that's just our goal, is to make sure that everybody is listening. So with that, I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to do a quick introduction of Mitch Cohen, who is here to help me as our resident local government nerd, self-proclaimed. Mitch is a wealth of knowledge of how he was a former selectman, wealth of knowledge on how things work, and he's also studied the ARPA guidance more than the rest of us have, most of us. So he's here just as an advisor if we need it, and then I'm going to turn it over to John Morse, our facilitator for tonight, John is a 20-year resident in Northborough. He's the dad of 3 kids, 2 are at Algonquin, 1 at St. John's. He's a longtime community volunteer, and he currently serves as the assistant principal at St. John's, so he is very well versed at working these kind of crowds.
Thank you, Marilee. So again, for those of you who don't know me, my name is John Morris. I live on Weston Terrace. My wife Beth and I moved in 2003. We have 3 children, Sam, 21, Will, 18, and Lily, who is 16 years old. Sam and Lily are at Algonquin, Will is at St. John's. Professionally, I have been an ethics teacher for over 25 years at the college and high school level. Most of the time, I'm adjudicating debates between teenage boys who are known for their calm, rational demeanor. So I figure I'm maybe well practiced for a forum like this tonight. Within the town of Northborough, I have been a youth baseball coach, a youth basketball coach, a catechist at St. Rose of Lima, a member of the Board of Trustees or the advisory board at St. Bernadette's. I am currently on the booster committee at Algonquin, representing the Unified Sports Program, Unified Track, and Unified Basketball. The one thing I haven't stepped into is town government and town politics, which is why Marilee said, John, we need someone who knows absolutely nothing about this, but can facilitate a discussion. And I was happy to say yes to my friend Marilee. So, the format of tonight is we want to spend 45 minutes here at the beginning generating ideas. Those ideas can be needs that you think the town has. They can be sort of existing things that the town has already proposed along the way, and maybe sort of explaining that. They can be things that you have noticed either anecdotally or in your engagement in the town that have emerged as a result of the last 2 years of the pandemic. So the first phase of tonight is just going to be sort of identifying needs, identifying things that might have emerged from the pandemic, or perhaps even that notion of dreaming, right? Hey, we have always wanted, or we've always sort of noticed that this might be a great thing for our community. So within that first phase, what I'm going to ask folks to do is, if you want to speak up and identify that, raise your hand. I'll come over to you, give you the mic. Marilee will jot the idea down. We have some focus categories here that I'll go through in a second. What we're going to try to do is bundle things in these focus categories. During the first 45 minutes, I'm going to ask folks not to be critical of other people's ideas. Right? We are going to be in the idea generating phase at the beginning. Then we'll take a 5-minute break, because it's great to be together again and great to see each other. And then, for the next 40 minutes, what we're going to do is we're going to enter what I call the critical phase. During the critical phase, you can either ask questions about some of the ideas that are on the board. You can support one of the ideas on the board. You can maybe point out some of the potential issues with that. Those issues may be cost, they may be a question of priority. I will moderate that piece, right? So within the critical phase, we're giving folks the opportunity to say, hey, you know what, that's a great idea, but, or, hey, you know what, that's a great idea, and. So that will be the goal of that. After the critical phase is over, Marilee is going to give, or has given everybody a couple sticky notes. And what we're going to ask folks to do is we're going to ask them to look at the different bundle categories, put your sticky note on a bundle category that you think is a priority and that the town should be looking at with the ARPA funds. As Marilee said, we're not making any proposals tonight. We're not doing any budgets. We're not voting on specific ideas. Right? Our goal here is a forum, right? And within the spirit of the forum, we want the ideas to come into the forum so they can be heard, they can be listened to, they can be thought about a little bit. right? And then we can ask people to think forward. Are there any questions about process? Yes?
I just have a question about the 2.2 million, because they're voting on Monday. What was that going toward?
The list, so convinced of it.
Okay, since I am not an expert on this, I'm not going to answer that question. I think maybe that's a great question for the critical phase.
Mitch can probably, do you want to give an outline, or?
I'd love to wait till the critical
Okay.
phase of that, because we are still in the idea generation phase. Sound fair? It's my first big decision. As a facilitator.
It would seem useful to give this some structure.
Pardon?
It would seem useful to give this just a little bit of structure.
Like what's
even
on
though,
the
even though
table?
it's just the idea phase,
So we know.
the dollars that we're looking at this year versus when the other 1.8 is, just as a frame of reference.
But if it's not voted on yet,
Yeah,
maybe
nothing's been decided.
don't sway anybody's ideas yet?
I'm just interested in learning what the
Oh, yeah, I know,
timeframe
I've seen
is,
it,
that's
so
all.
I don't have that.
Maybe just a quick explanation of what the time frame is, and then we can go to ideas.
She has a copy of it right there.
I'll pass it
Here,
on.
pass it on that.
Timeframe,
I saw
John,
the list.
Oh,
The
no.
timeframe, I'm clear on.
December 2024 is when the decisions need to be made, correct?
Everything has to be
Policy one?
spent by
Yes.
then.
Okay, I'm happy with this as a process question. All right, so the process question is, when is the money essentially being received and when does it need to be spent by? And what is on the table? You need the mic.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
So about 2.4 million has been received already by the town and is sitting in the banks and can be spent at any time. The remainder of the 4 million is expected, I believe, sometime during the month of May. The rules is that the funds need to be committed to some project by the end of calendar 2024 and actually expended, I believe, by the end of 2026. Hope that answers the question.
I think so. Are we satisfied?
That's perfect, thank
Good.
you.
Okay. Love these bits. That's ready? All right, 45 minutes for ideas. We're on. Would anybody like to propose or sort of suggest or identify? Yes, I can come to you. Oh, I'm sorry. Right, so just to provide some framework, Marilyn and I and Mitch brainstormed these sort of general focus areas. Number one would be small business, job creation, ongoing economic development. Number two would be acute health or mental health needs. And we say acute in terms of things that may have emerged during the pandemic. I can tell you from a school perspective, we're seeing a flood of teenage mental health issues, and a lot of them seem to be linked to adult issues too. Number three, we could, the third bucket would be either increasing or funding social service organizations within the Northborough umbrella. That could be food, housing insecurity, childcare, seniors, diversity and inclusion. Number four would be infrastructure needs within the community. Things like broadband, roads, sidewalks. Number five, recreation and conservation. Ways in which to develop those pieces of our beautiful town. Number six would be supporting education and child development. Number seven would be to to support the existing capital plan that we already have in town, and or help sort of expend on existing capital expenses. And number eight is the other bucket, things that we can't neatly fit into that. So once you make a suggestion, we'll put it in one of. I want to just let people go, and you can flip. You can flip. If we have tape, we could put them up on different walls too. So you have the floor first.
I just received the Focus Facebook announcement, which I'm sure a lot of you did. And I was just surprised to see the wish list of things on there, given that we've just been through a historic pandemic. I'm not a prepper, but I would think that a lot of the monies should be preparation for, hopefully not, but another situation that may arise. We need to be prepared, number one. And number two, certainly current mental health needs need to be addressed and funded for children, elders, all the folks in Northborough.
Okay, so first two ideas being suggested, one would be mental health needs as a result of the pandemic. And the second idea, which I'm gonna suggest we put into other, would be sort of security planning for potential further economic downturn, catastrophe, that kind of thing. Fair?
Not economic downturn, but,
Another pandemic.
yeah, I mean, the town should have some, at least some rubber gloves around for, and some sanitizer around. We shouldn't all be running around like chickens with their heads cut off looking for that.
I don't mind sort of just doing future pandemic supplies. Okay, others. Yes, Carol.
My question is, has anybody checked with the Department of Youth and Family Services to see what their needs are? One of my good friends is the executive director of Shrewsbury Youth and Family Services, so I know exactly what their needs are. You don't hear much about Northborough's, unfortunately,
You
Youth
wanna
and
use
Family
it?
Services.
Okay.
Does anyone know if Northborough Youth and Family Services identified any needs?
Yes.
Okay,
If I can speak to that, yes.
I'm fine
Okay.
if you want to add on to that, Jerry.
Okay. Thanks for setting me up, actually. So I'm actually a member of the Committee for Northborough Youth and Family Services. And I apologize, I haven't been in front of a mic and a presentation like this is probably a school project, so bear with me. But I did a lot of research because when I saw what the funding was supposed to be spent for, I was curious what our needs in town actually are. I've actually been a member for less than a year. My kids have been in school my entire time that we've lived here, which is 11 years. So I have a 21-year-old, a high schooler, and a kiddo finishing elementary school this year. The identified issues, and we actually just had a meeting this past Thursday. The food pantry, and I can corroborate this with Scouting for Food, has the highest rate of people utilizing the pantries that they've ever had. Helping Hands, which is another organization in town that might get referrals from Northborough Youth and Family Services, have 2 sheds that are nearly empty because the elective services, surgeries that were held off because of COVID are now all happening at once. The department has experienced significant impact from COVID-19, all aspects of people's lives, increase in need for case management, increase in basic needs, increase in referral services. Many of the family situations present with multiple problems that are very involved and complex. We currently have 8 homeless families in town, one of which includes children. And the risk of homelessness is prominent. This includes people who have lost housing due to moratorium on the paying for rent, evictions, natural disasters, loss of employment, and serious health issues and financial hardships.
All right, Sherry, I'm gonna give you 1 more minute. You've been on the mic for 2.
Okay. One of the problems is you'll hear about state funding for some of these things. A lot of these programs, like with the homelessness, there's a large wait. So these families still require assistance in town until those things. We only have 1 of the 8 families that have currently found permanent housing. I guess I'll share more when it comes to the thing, but there's a lot of needs in town.
Can I add to that with,
Thank you. Yes,
Yeah.
if it's new. Is it new?
yes, it's-
Okay.
part of
You want the mic or no mic?
no,
Okay. I
part
might
of
have to re-summarize it, but go ahead.
the, part of the family news services, I'm also on a committee, it's, the Benevolent Fund, and I don't think a lot of people in town know about it. But it's a fund that we have to help people in town when, you know, they're hurting, or, you know, we helped a family who had the husband had ALS, and we were able to help the mother with mortgage and food, and so I think that's a fund that we could put some money in so we
Okay.
can help other people.
Benevolent Fund? Got it. Good. Okay. Yes. Yes, go ahead, Meg.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, kind of,
Closer.
sorry.
That's okay.
I'm just gonna read a statement right up. Okay, so, as we all know, the harms and challenges caused by the COVID-19 pandemic are not new or are not isolated to a specific location or economic sector. There are universal challenges throughout all communities, such as the need for rental assistance, COVID-19 testing, and broadband infrastructure. And as Northborough begins to allocate these funds, it is important for us to have regularly scheduled town meetings as outlined in the federal guidelines so that people can continue to give their input and so that there's transparency. Also, obtain key input from stakeholders such as teachers, social workers, nonprofit leaders, and community leaders to implement interventions that are grounded in evidence-based practice such as premium pay for essential workers. Center the process and decisions around equity. Throughout this process, Northborough and our town officials should prioritize supporting individuals most harmed by the pandemic, such as individuals with low socioeconomic status, individuals within the BIPOC community, individuals within the AAPI community, disabled individuals, and LGBTQ+ individuals. And focus on expanding programs that support individuals most impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, such as expanding mental health supports for students grade K-12 through 12. Since the beginning of the pandemic, there's been probably about a 60% increase in mental health needs among children. And it is very scary. There's been increased anxiety, suicide attempts, depression, and it is needed, and those supports are extremely needed.
Awesome, thank you. So just to summarize, diversity and inclusion issues are on that list, and then mental health needs. And then I think town processes is something that emerged from that summary list. So, all right, we got 35 minutes. So yes, sir, and then I'm coming there next.
After doing some review, one of the things I found from Millbury and Shrewsbury is what they've done is, I'm gonna have you go back to the first page for small business. They're providing small business grants. This is for not only reimbursement, because a lot of these small businesses have now had to put out money for revamping how they do business, adding in face guards, face shields, all of that stuff. So a grant for reimbursement for some of that money that they've spent in order to stay open, as well as some of the businesses that have had to close. I know of at least 2 restaurants in Northborough that have shuttered, right? They're done. I'm sure there are many more other small businesses. We need to keep business in town so that we can all keep our own property taxes down. They help pay a lot of the property taxes in town. So, a small business grant for bringing in new business to replace some of the businesses that have had to close.
Awesome. Thank you. Yes.
So, mental health has definitely been covered by a lot of people, so I'm not really going to touch on that much. But when the remote learning returned to in-person learning, a lot of the students who were unable to engage in remote learning returned with a lot of loss of skills and a loss of literacy and a loss of education that they're still making up for. And the educators have not been able to make up for that, and we have a shortage of teachers, a shortage of certified educators in Wilson, Dean, and Orton Gillingham, a loss of tutors for all the students who are on school refusal because of the mental health reasons and they can't return to school. We have a shortage of nurses, we have a shortage of the mental health workers in the school. So there are a shortage of special educators for residential programs dealing with students who have severe disabilities. So I would say a lot of funding is needed in the education world.
Thank you. You're welcome.
My name is Victoria Colleen, and I work at the Northborough Senior Center as a manager of the Bistro 119. It's a restaurant open to the public and also helps raise funds to support our senior center. Our senior center is a beautiful center up on Barefoot Road, And as of now, I believe 25% of the seniors are 60 and older in this town. So it's utilized, but we also need some funds to help us with some committees, to help fund memory care units that we have, help fund any kind of exercise programs, computer programs for the seniors, and I think it's well needed in this town. And also too, I am a member of the Pantry with Karen, and also Community Meals, which we've been doing for 2.5 years. It's a grab and go here at Trinity on Wednesday night, and it would be wonderful if we could have some funds to continue that, because I know by the end of May, we're out. It's about $620 a week that we have to spend on meals. We're up to 120, 130 meals a week, so it's well needed. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're rolling. Other hopes, dreams, needs?
Good evening, neighbors. I think the social services, of course, should carry much gravitas. But I also see the possibility of adding to the beautiful job that's been done with downtown and the new commons, and planting trees throughout the town. This seems to be a town that just cuts them without regard. And so in terms of conservation, that maybe some beautification and accenting our river.
Infrastructure?
So recreation conservation would be added to beautification. And I'd also like to say that I've been alerted that there's a cut in arts funding at the kindergarten level, which is like a Nancy Kerrigan blow to the knee for the entire program, including what the seniors will enjoy. It's that long reach of what education can really mean. And so that's very heavy on my heart.
I'm sorry, I missed that one.
Arts, education.
Hey, John, can I have a couple of emails that I want to weigh in with? Not my thoughts? After next?
Yeah, we still have some hands, and we still have 30 minutes.
Have a hand, have a hand.
Yeah, and then you can have your hand up, so.
I don't know if this has already been done, I'm a little out of the loop, but on the idea of infrastructure, if we haven't already, if we could fund better ventilation in all our schools, places where people congregate in Northborough to help dampen the impact of any future waves, and our senior center.
Super, but let other people go first.
Okay.
Over here.
I just had a couple of ideas, probably not at the top of the chain, but a dog park would be nice. A swap shop. Swap shop where you recycle things and what have you. I still don't know why we don't have a town dump. And
So that's infrastructure would be town, yeah. And then the swap shop, I would put into, either other or social services, but some of that, but it's not necessarily a social service. Other.
a garden for the food pantry.
Community garden.
We have that.
And that's one on,
We have the farm,
Main
bring
Mountain,
stuff to us
yeah.
all the time. The Midians and the bear, everybody's.
We're working on a dog park too.
Really?
but this is, but again, it's working on something that's already existing, right? It's, the ARPA funds can kickstart something that's already in the works, so. And again, it's not, hopes are fine too, right? It doesn't have to be necessarily a pandemic need. The ARPA funds can be for like, hey, we've always wanted to do this. Right, under the guise of sort of economic development, kickstarting the community.
And an Alzheimer's daycare program.
Yes.
If there isn't enough.
Isn't it only like once a week?
All right, we're rolling. I'll work my way up. So you've already had a turn, Carolyn. So Carrie gets to go after Carolyn.
In terms of economic development, I know there's been lots of talk about developing an economic development committee in town. So along with the Be Well Northborough initiative, where they're, giving funds to other town departments, it would be great to give some funds to start an economic development committee in town to kickstart some of these other initiatives.
Along the lines of what Karen said, we talk a lot about downtown, and I think the economic piece comes hand in hand with that. I'd love to see a resource, a staff, someone on staff, part-time or full-time, whatever, we could manage to be in charge of that, facilitate it, and really drive it forward. Otherwise, it doesn't have a lot of teeth. So that would be something I think that would be worthwhile to go hand in hand with any sort of downtown development.
Right, staff. So as like a town position, so that would be staff.
And is staff part of the, Mitch, do you know, staff?
The money has to be spent by September of 2024, so it's not
So maybe
recommended.
it's like a seed for to get something started.
Yeah, I mean, the brief version is that they don't encourage new staff or existing staff to be funded by it, because when the money goes away, the money goes away. You should, unless the town also has a plan as to how to fund that long-term, it really shouldn't be used for that from ARPA's recommendation.
Got it.
Sure.
Right, it can be sparked though, and then.
Contract.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. Yes, sir.
Hi, I would like to have solar cells over parking lots, starting with maybe with governmental parking lots. It brings revenue basically for long term or no costs, and secondly also some things with global heating, also better parking cars for employees.
Solar.
Solar roofs over parking lots. And then in a further way, maybe supporting matching funds with private developers, where a big part of the town are parking lots right now, and that should get covered by solar cells.
So solar cells, and there are also local high schools, and
That's right.
North High School, Wayland High School have those in their student parking sections, so, okay. Great. I'm gonna go to the back and then work my way forward again, and we are still great with time. We're at 24 minutes to go, so.
Hi, I called into the selectmen to bring to their attention that ARPA funds would be perfectly suited to addressing the climate emergency that we're under, and increasing the amount of solar that we could install municipally, putting in EV charging. It would be great economic development tool, driver as well, brings people in who want to recharge on the way to do errands. So I'm thinking about this. I heard from Mitch Cohen, who looked into a state program that actually the town gets paid to install EV. It doesn't even necessarily come at a cost to the town, but it's something that any ARPA funds could help offset trenching to get electrical supply or whatever needed, whatever support was needed for that. And then the other thing is, I'm aware of what Westborough's doing, and they have really supercharged ahead on this. They apparently have 8 hybrid police cruisers already, and they're getting electric vehicles for their building inspector and fire chief. They are also installing, let's see, they have some municipal EV charging already at the golf course, the municipal golf course. And we do have some solar here in Northborough, but I think it's a really well-kept secret that the high school has solar on it. I didn't know until a few months ago, but apparently it was put in 2020. Like, to know what our town has, where we're going, what our goals are, I think this funding could be used to help us formulate that plan and policy and start to move and catch up to our neighbors like Westborough.
Some of us don't like losing to Westboro. Maybe that's not a loss though, but, okay. Working my way up here, so then I'll come over to you, Sue.
Hello, Ryan Steele, first time speaker. I've got 3 ideas. One is streetlights, because we have a big dig-dug ditch problem on our street, and I don't know if that would solve it, but it feels like there's not many streetlights or any in our town. The second one is the Northborough, I don't know how this is funded, and I've never actually tried, but the Northborough rec program seems to sell out in like 10 seconds, I think, like the summer activity program. And I think that is potentially a good thing to look at adding more capacity to, because obviously there's tons of demand, especially with kids becoming more and more addicted to the screens. And third one is co-working space. So a lot of people work from home, but would like to have close by places to go and have a meeting or to just not work from home. And so that could be I think a revenue generating thing if the town ran it. Obviously there's for-profit co-working, businesses, but as someone that works from home, it would be good.
Hi, Sue Ogar, just to sort of expand on the small business side of things. So Carrie was mentioning sort of expanding like downtown and development. But I guess that is super key, but also sort of the flip side of that is what happened to some of these small businesses during COVID. So we know a few have closed, but what happened to the other ones? Are they surviving? Are they doing well? I run a small business myself, and I'm not yelling from the rooftops about all the challenges I had, but there were lots of them, and I had to change the way I did all my business, and I was completely shut down for a while. So I know some of the more like brick and mortar restaurants or stores are having trouble getting employees. Some of them have had to shut down their hours. There's a great restaurant in town that randomly shuts down every 3rd day because they can't staff. So I think maybe we need some sort of evaluation of what actually has happened to those businesses, what do they need short term and long term. So I mean, I think Hudson just won some award for being like the best main street in the U.S., which is awesome, and Hudson's doing a great job. So I think long term, I would love to see some great new businesses, small businesses come in town, and that would be the end goal. And sort of the short term goal is like, what has COVID done to the businesses that are currently here, and who's checking in on them? Are there grants? Are there ways to get this could help sort of the teenage mental health, maybe also like how to get some of those teenagers into some of those jobs that maybe would be good for everybody. People, I don't know, just looking at that stuff.
Sue, fair to also say that sometimes that's something that needs to be professionally done, right? So like market studies, that type of thing. So not just people asking the small businesses what they need, but a real funding, like a real external, doing some kind of professional study.
So sort of both, sort of
Yeah.
that, and then also just more basic levels.
Right. I'm right here. I'm gonna come over to you, sir. Okay. And if you don't mind, sir, I'll go this way.
Where with the COVID and the kids and everything else, and they haven't been involved in activities for the past couple of years, it'd be nice to have more activities, and for the people who can't afford it, some funding or scholarships for the kids so that they can go, because I know some of the sports are very expensive.
So that would be sort of extra support for, like, so again, there are user fees and that type of thing for athletic programs.
Scholarships for recreation.
Recreation. And, yeah, maybe a little bit in recreation, a little bit in schools, but.
Hi. I recently saw a teen center in Syracuse where they were funded in the 80s, and I spoke with the director. I have budgeting and everything on it. If you drive down Main Street from 3 o'clock on, you see a bunch of middle schoolers and high schoolers any day of the week running around. There's been, like you talk to any of the businesses and they say, why don't we have a teen center? We have a lot of empty storefronts, we could start small. One of the suggestions was like, if you, the director said if she were to use the ARPA money, she would get canoes, she would get, snowshoes, she would get cross-country skis, like some of the things that can get the kids outside and together, because guarantee you, I think parents would feel better if they were there. Maybe need staff and everything, but I really think a teen center is important. Maybe a couple more crosswalk lights. I know my Board of Select people are in the audience and know me very well. I'm the crosswalk light lady. But, there's some that could connect Proctor going across Davis Street, where the kids go back and forth, same kids that could be in a teen center, but they could also use crosswalk lights. So those are my ideas.
As a runner, I use the crosswalk lights there. Thank you for your work. Yes, sir.
I don't know, Mike.
Okay.
I was the chairman for the Diversity and Inclusion Committee in Northborough. We spent a year talking with all the various chairs and department heads about diversity and inclusion in our town. We made a series of recommendations to the Board of Selectmen, and one of the recommendations we made was to hire an outside consulting firm to come in and work with the town, work with all the various departments, work with the school department, and integrate all of our policies around diversity and inclusion. The consultant will probably take about 12 to 18 months to do that. In the grand scheme of a $70 million annual budget that the town has, the consultant would be a small part of that, but it still would be a few $100,000. And one of the things that as a committee we were looking forward to was we knew the ARPA money was coming in, and we think it would be a great use to use some of the ARPA funds to hire these outside consultants to help us work through some of the diversity and inclusion challenges that we have in town. And then on the other side, we have a master plan implementation committee right now, and they just came out with two biggest priorities for the community. One of them being downtown redevelopment. And thinking about downtown redevelopment, one of the challenges we have as a community is we don't have a lot of space. All the space downtown is taken. And when I drive downtown, I always look at White Cliffs and think that is just such a waste of precious space, and all White Cliffs does is suck up money. So I think it would be great to use some of the ARPA money to get rid of White Cliffs, knock it down, make that land developable, and put in a brewery. I've worked in the craft beer industry for about 20 years. I just got done building a great project in Brighton. The project is actually, the development's a square. Inside the square is all open, so you can drink outside during the nice season. And then along the square, there's a brewery, a tap room, and each of the stalls around, there's a sake bar, there's a cocktail bar, there's small restaurants, there's a coffee shop, and it's all enclosed in one area, and it really doesn't take up all that much space. So when you look at White Cliffs, you drive up the driveway, and you have this square stall type of structure on top there that we could actually use not only for the town to have a place for people to go, but you have all those places in there that will all pay taxes to the community. So it would be, instead of having White Cliffs that sucks up money, we can have something that everybody can enjoy and would kick in money that we can then use for schools and all this other stuff that everybody's talking about. Thank you.
I gave you a little extra time because of craft brewery. Minimally, we want more away games against Shepherd Hill, so we can go to Charlton Dudley, right?
Yes.
Thanks. Tim kind of took a little bit of my thunder there. Ashley Davies, I am the chair of the Master Plan Implementation Committee. I just, with the pandemic, we kind of, a lot of things came local, supply chain issues were very clear, so anything that we can do to kind of try to bring things more local, I think, would be helpful. What Jean had said about trying to make ourselves more self-sufficient, more solar, more things that we could have in-house so that if we run out of power, we can deal with that in town. But also beautification of downtown, improving our sidewalks and walkability will help small businesses and bring more businesses local. And the last thing I wanted to mention was White Cliffs. I think it's a great asset that our town has, and unfortunately right now from the outside it looks like junk and it looks like it's unsavable, but I think it really does have some serious potential. And in looking, if anybody has ever been to Berlin, to 19 Carter, they've done a great job in using a nonprofit group, but also along with the town, in refurbishing this old church, which is now a senior center and a youth center. So they have seniors up top, youth down below, but it's really a center for the community. They have lots of events, bands play, and they also have stalls for local artisans to show their wares, and a place for people who are changing the way their small business is working to be able to show it there. So I think White Cliffs could kind of be a place for all of these things, and it could be a great space, outdoor and indoor. And also could house that teen or youth center, and could be a great place for this co-office area, because I do think a lot of people that are now working from home would love a place to have an official meeting, and that could be a place for that to happen. So that's just my suggestion, to not tear down White Cliffs, and I think I would love a brewery, but maybe somewhere else in town.
I think the old Bank of America would be a great spot for a brewery.
Yeah.
As much as, no, again, and I want to thank, the dreaming big, I think, is part of this. We can throw support behind that in the critical phase.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I've been a resident here for 40 years, and I've experienced a lot of being volunteers, getting help from volunteers, volunteering for myself. And my main concern is that all the agencies that we get support from when we need it in crisis, most of them I've known are run by volunteers who scramble, providing their time, their energy, their own funds to support the rest of the town, and I don't think they're recognized in the level that they should be, including the food pantry, the senior center, the youth and family services. They've supported me over the years, so I know what I'm talking about. I'd like to see more funding going to these people who do not have business savvy, who do not own a business, but are providing all these supports that keep Northborough running. Going back to the town, I think comparing us to other cities is good, but Northborough is landlocked. I was on a committee where I tried to buy land for soccer fields, and that didn't go through. I'm wondering why we're not buying the land next to the middle school, just to have the space. We don't have any parking downtown, so how can we get to the walking areas when people live in the outskirts and have to drive downtown in order to walk? That doesn't seem to make sense to me. And as for the sidewalks and the traffic lights, I walk around from the senior center area almost every day. The snow plowing in the winter of the sidewalks and the intersections is not good. I brought that to the DPW and the chief of police's attention. We've got the traffic lights that we have to coordinate the traffic through town with. Now there's a concern because it delays when people want to push the pedestrian button to walk across the street. So what are we offering for our town? How do we blend all these things together? And I'm also a 79-year-old senior citizen who I don't feel the seniors are ready enough support to help them with their needs, because they don't have cell phones and computers, so they're not getting all this information either. And we're having a meeting at 7 o'clock at night when half of us are going to bed. So maybe there's a way to get us involved at another time. Thank you.
So nuts.
Marilyn, I did sort of make you aware.
Sorry, thank you.
No, that's good, that's good. We still have 8 minutes and 52 seconds in the, yes.
I actually had a couple business owners reach out via email because they couldn't be here tonight, and so I just wanted to share some of those ideas that came. These are not my ideas, these are coming from some local business owners. Help with assistance with marketing and advertising, our business to new potential customers and driving traffic into the businesses, employee training, grants to improve indoor or outdoor seating to motivate customers to visit the business, and improving the outdoor structure of the business, so fresh paint, siding, etc., to make Main Street more attractive, and help with retaining employees, which was sort of touched on before. And another business owner I talked to mentioned that they actually had a pretty successful 2020 and 2021, but that things are looking fairly grim for this year. So I think the sort of long-term projections based on COVID, because of the inflation, the staffing shortages, all of that are really impacting now. So to Sue's point about talking to our businesses and about how things are going at their businesses, I think a lot of us think, well, COVID's over, they're fine now, we're back in the stores, but maybe that's not the case. I did hear from another business who said, you know, their cost of goods has like tripled, and so they're trying to, you know, stock up right now before it goes up even higher. So again, more push for supporting our businesses and making sure that they can, they have what they need.
We have another new one before we go for round two.
I'll be quick. Just along the lines of the master plan, I'd love to see investment in mixed-use trails, the Beewalt Trail. I know that's been talked about, so I'd love to see some ARPA funds used towards that.
So that's mixed-use trails, Be Well Trails. We are at 6 minutes and 45 seconds.
I have two super specific ones to go along with mental health in town. One thing that I think never comes up on surveys because it never hits this demographic is it interfaces the town referral for psychologists. They got 65% more calls in 2020 and 144% increase for parents of children 0 through 5. I think we need a support group in town for the caretakers of those going through mental health issues. It's something I hear all the time about how stressed out parents are or how stressed out spouses are dealing with mental health issues in their household. And then the second one just happened to fall into my lap today as I was leaving All Town Band with my kiddo. This is this year's proposed cut to the chorus and band programs at our elementary schools. It is not a lot of money, and the majority of the money went towards hard copy things, music supplies, curricular material. This, to me, is a very easy ARPA-funded item and does not belong on the cutting floor of our school budget.
Hi. I just wanted to tack on to whoever was talking about the downtown area. I was on the committee, I was one of the members to help create the town common. And the biggest complaint we hear is there's no parking, how are we gonna attract people to downtown if we have no parking? I completely agree. There are a few little plots near the downtown area that the town could purchase for parking. It's very important, especially have no handicap parking. It's hard for the elderly to walk. So I think that's, if we're trying to attract people to use the downtown, and businesses in downtown, we need to offer parking. Thank you.
I'm going to try to get new speakers.
Hi, my name is Noelle Sylvia. I am a parent and I am the president of the Northborough Education Foundation. And to your point about the cut in the chorus things, what we see is a lot of materials that are needed, and I feel like the PTOs as well as NEF fund right now, we just haven't been able to get the funding that we need. And I think just a little of this money could go a really long way at the schools, because I think there's so many, not just academic programs or help, but I think there are materials that the school needs that they can't get.
Can I clarify that, to the same point?
Can we save it for the critical phase doesn't have to be mean, it can be critique or, yes. Sure. Everything's gonna be super quick now.
Mini golf course. And seriously, they're really far away. It would attract tons of people to town. And it could be part of the brewery.
Beers and clubs.
And then I'll be right over.
My name is Rudy Gobot. Small suggestion is to, instead of to get out clips, to rebuild the old train station and to be prepared if the train line stops, that we have maybe a tourist attraction where we can ride the train tracks up and down. So train station for small business. Train station for small business.
couple of ideas I haven't heard mentioned. Some towns, I know at least including the town of Sudbury runs this program, which sounds really intriguing to me, which is to buy gift cards from local businesses and then give them to people in needs. So it both helps economic development and then helps the people in need. I think there's small amounts of that happening in town now, but to really dramatically grow that, especially right now, would be great. And to fully fund job search and training programs. The town library has some mostly run by volunteers. It would be really good to get some experts in, figure out what the programs are that we should be offering the residents, and try to do a great job with those.
Yes?
Full disclosure, I'm on the Northborough Cultural Council, and we have a lot of great ideas and programs that are up and coming that we feel, I'm speaking for myself, we met last night and have things that we're bringing forward, but we are looking out for the well-being for the town and also to beautify. So please consider the Northborough Cultural Council when you're doing some of your events or planning, because I think there's a lot of partnering that can happen and that we can work together. So I'm raising my hand for some of the funds too. Thank you.
All right, I am going to say, I think we get the last word on the mic, sir.
Thank you. I'm on the Master Plan Implementation Committee as well. And a lot of people talk about buying land. One of the most important things about a master plan is having that available, and you don't get chances or second chances if land's available. So if it's in a strategic spot, whether it's near White Cliffs or someone else, but especially downtown, there's no way we're gonna make it more attractive without the ability to have parking, whether it's on street or small parking lots, or to have green spaces where you can actually enter buildings from the back if it's done right. But I think acquiring any of the available land near the downtown solves a lot of these problems, and it can be used temporarily for other things until it falls in line with what the master plan would ultimately want it to be, whether it's a park initially or something else. But usually you get one shot at that and that's it. And
if you use CPA money, it takes so long to acquire the CPA money.
yeah, so I just, that would be a big deal.
Land purchasing.
Yeah, to facilitate
Economic development.
of all the small businesses, everybody wins with that.
Any suggestions on where that economic development?
More so than conservation.
It would be infrastructure or economic development.
Okay, so one of my rules of thumb is not to make people sit in one spot when you're trying to have a great discussion for more than 45 minutes, and we are at the 45-minute mark. So we're gonna take a 5-minute break. I suggest folks get up, move around. We will re-engage at 8:10, and at that point, we will enter the critique or critical phase of some of what we've heard. Okay, so for the next 40 minutes or so, what we're going to do is we're going to sort of, as I said earlier, enter what I call the critical phase. What does that mean? What that means is we've had a lot of really interesting, fun ideas that have been talked about, that have been sort of thrown up. We dreamed big, we identified needs, we talked about hopes, we talked about ongoing issues within the community. Great job in that first half. But it's important to understand there's a finite amount of money, right? That there are things, that there are town budgets, right? That there are a lot of reasons now that the ideas are out to sort of say, well, have we thought about this? Or, wait a minute, that's gonna be coming through this. Or, do we really need that? Is that really a priority? Right? So this is a phase where what we're allowing folks to do is to offer either some critique or to look at the questions of like cost, or if somebody proposed an idea and you want to get more information about that, right? That's what this phase is for. All right, so again, feel comfortable. It's easy to throw out the big ideas, right? We understand that. It can be a little bit harder and a little bit more daunting to sort of say, I'm a little uncomfortable with that, or I need more information about that. The other thing that I would like to add in this phase is, if there are sort of big questions that need to be asked, right? And that we want the folks, the select men and women to consider, right? Maybe the critical phase is also the question, is a place where we can sort of say, this question, I kind of want to know the answer to, or I think should be thought about, or something like that. Right, so in this phase, we'll do critique. We'll do, if you have, again, critique can be anything there. We'll do, if there are big questions that you have lingering that you want considered, that is where this phase is concerned too. I will make a determination if a critique is brought up, if the person has an opportunity to sort of counter that. I don't want to get into counterpoint, but I want people who may have some sort of skepticism or concerns about all the wonderful ideas that we just heard here to voice those concerns. Are there any questions about process? Yes?
Will we begin by stating what's actually applicable to the guidelines for the usage of the funds? Since we have
I
Mr.
think
Cohen
that
here to.
definitely falls within the realm of critique. Yes.
Okay.
So yes, yeah.
I mean, you
I'm not knowledgeable of that, but if you feel like you are,
No,
or,
you said you
or
brought
Mitchell
a
wants
professional in.
to do that, then that's where we'll start the critique phase.
Yeah, maybe Mr. Cohen could take us through and show us what is not applicable.
Sure, I'll do my best. That's a very good question. Essentially, because we are being funded under $10 million, we have almost carte blanche to do almost anything else. Anything that municipal government can legally spend money on is available for funding. The only gray area that I couldn't figure out definitively from reading it is putting money towards retirement benefits, which I know was discussed. So in one section of the document, the Treasury says you can spend it on anything up to $10 million. And another part they say you can't put it towards retirement benefits. So I don't know about that. That isn't an item that came up on the list, so it doesn't really apply. Other than that, the only guidance that they provide is not to spend it, and we talked about this briefly earlier, not to spend it on salaries unless you have a plan in place to maintain that. And that's important both for just planning purposes, and in theory, if you fund a salary and then you take it away, you have to pay unemployment, and that's expensive.
So what you're seeing up there, probably everything is applicable.
I didn't pay that much attention with thinking
Okay.
that in mind, but nothing jumped out at me as saying, yeah, we really can't do that. There were a couple of salary-related things that kind of got on there.
Okay.
But one way to deal with it is if it's a short-term need, you can hire contractors to do some of those things, or outside companies to do some of those things, and that's absolutely applicable.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Excuse me?
Yes?
Question for Mitch. One of the things I saw on the plan was eligible uses, and one of the eligible uses was for essential employees. So how does that fit with the salary piece? Or essential workers, I should say.
Sure. So what you're allowed to do, not particularly advocating for it, but you're allowed to do is pay essential workers essentially a bonus. If a worker worked very hard or a department worked extra hard during the pandemic, maybe they're a salaried worker, but they worked 70 hours a week dealing with all sorts of things that they were never initially hired to do, you can, in theory, back pay them a little bit more. That's what I took out of that item. Right now, we're not in a phase of COVID where we're doing a lot of extra vaccination work and things like that, but you can hire people for that purpose, of course. A lot of that has been funded from other programs, which is why the town hasn't talked about paying for those things out of ARPA money.
Yes?
I'd like to know, out of all the ideas that were proposed here, where is there overlap with like the Be Well program? Like, because I know there's already some programs that were suggested by the town, but I just don't know enough about it. there's gotta be overlap on here and like the Be Well and some of the other programs. Does anybody know?
Yeah, and I think that, Carolyn, you could put that in a general critique of some of these ideas might be being funded from other sources, therefore we don't need ARPA for it. So I think that's a legit question.
I was just gonna answer, so.
Yeah, go
our-
ahead.
Oh, do I-
Sure. Well, it's up to you, Sarah.
My understanding of the Be Well is that nothing has been decided yet. There is funding set aside that's split up over 2 years between all of the different departments, kind of social welfare-y, the police, the fire, like Mayor Lay had said. And it is the committee's job to figure out what to do with that funding.
It's $100,000.
So,
Split between all of them.
$100,000 split over 2 years, so
2 years between all the
$50,000 a
committees.
year between all the committees.
Not committees.
Or departments, sorry.
Departments.
Yeah.
Can I add something to that?
Sure. Do you want the microphone or do you
I
want?
can probably talk loud enough. So,
Sure.
the Be Well initiative is all of those committees in town, and it is, our goal is to build connections back that were lost during COVID. So to build those connections through all those committees reaching out to the town. So that's the basic goal of that whole initiative. All those committees coming together for that initiative.
Right, so there's some money, so just to summarize, it sounds like there's some money for funding that, but it's spread out over a fairly broad umbrella. Yes.
Are we ready to start the criticisms and critiques?
Let it fly.
Actually, it's not I'm not criticizing or critiquing, it's my personal observations. So, looking at what we've talked about so far tonight, put my glasses on so I can see some of my notes. These are my priorities, take it or leave it. I think we need to help those in need, and that really came out in terms of the pandemic, but there's always been these needs. And when you look at the food pantry, it's small, could it be larger? What can we do to really make sure that there's something there? The Benevolent Fund, it's not big enough. We need some more funds in that account. And then the Youth and Family Services should be expanded. I think that, to me, that's one thing that came out tonight is how we are gonna help the people in need. The other thing is I noticed is a lot of the topics that came up tonight are in the master plan. I won't ask you to raise your hand, but how many people have actually read the master plan? It's only 2 years old. And if you look at it, a lot of these topics are already in there. So my angle on this is we have a master plan implementation committee. I would like to put the burden on them to look at the master plan and recognize what would fit under ARPA for our long-term requirements. That's it.
Can I just make a comment on the food pantry? There's a family in town that donates our space generously, the Shea family. So,
Oh, that's good news.
yeah, so I think we're pretty good with that right now.
So, Norm, if it's okay to summarize, there seem to be acute needs that emerged out of the pandemic, and you would like to sort of say, maybe that's a priority, in that there is master plan funding kind of in place. That said, could ARPA give it a little jolt? Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, I think that's about right.
Okay. I think that's a good example of the critical phase. Identifying a priority, right, and sort of saying, hey, what about this? Yes?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So to piggyback on what Norm said, a lot of what the needs seem to be are ongoing needs that are gonna require people. And in order to have funds in our tax revenue base to fund these positions beyond the 2-year period, using some of the ARPA for the capital projects and the things that would otherwise have to be funded by our tax dollars is a good way of leveraging, right? So many of these things that maybe were in our capital improvement, our capital plans for 5 years, if we pay for them with ARPA money, all of a sudden our taxes over the next few years can sustain those salary positions.
Okay, so this is essentially a critique of, right, utilize the funds for things that are already in the capital plan because that will allow for revenue to be spent on some of these ongoing things that have been identified tonight?
Not really, because what's in the capital right now, we usually use free cash because it's a one-time expense. But we need our annual revenue to sustain positions. So using ARPA to do big things that we haven't even thought about yet.
Right.
Getting them into that queue is important.
Okay, thank you. Better summarized than I was. Mitchell, you'd like to speak to that?
Yeah, we have to be careful with how we spend the money on capital items. One of the rules, I didn't mention earlier, that's my fault because it didn't relate to projects, is you're not allowed to spend it on tax reduction. So it's a little gray area. How are you spending on something that was already planned for and would likely be funded by town meeting out of ARPA? I think it's okay, but it's certainly not to the, in my interpretation, not to the intent of ARPA. I don't think we get dinged for it, but it's not to the intent. They want us to spend it on other things as much as possible so that more money goes back into the economy.
Other, yes, Sherry.
I was just gonna say, my hesitation and I think my shock when I saw the initial list of how ARPA money was being spent is that after being here for 11 years, and I've been at town meetings and I voted for all those capital expenses, I've felt they're needed, I have yet to see expenses raised for social welfare needs and for our schools. And the difference between when my son was in school 10 years ago, he's 21 now, so when we were in the elementary schools, and my daughter now, I see a very large change, and I see a very large change in the commitment to programming that isn't building related. Like, we're happy to spend on repairing a building for the school, but it doesn't seem like we're happy to spend the money on extra programming that our kids need. And the reality is those behavioral mental health issues at the elementary level are gonna become middle school issues, and then they're gonna become high school issues, and then they're gonna become townspeople issues. So my thing is, I really think with ARPA funding and with the mental health issues, we need to focus again on some of our social welfare and school programs to set things in the right direction.
And again, clarify, programs can be funded, but personnel, right, becomes a little bit of a gray area.
Personnel that you intend to keep long-term but don't have funding in place long-term are strongly frowned against.
And two things that I would suggest is, I personally think at Northborough Youth and Family Services, having done case management myself coming out of college, one full-time person and two part-time people for a town our size, I think is sad. And the fact that June does what she does is an absolute amazing thing to me. I think we should use funding to jumpstart getting another full-time person. And I also think we could use funding to hire somebody to write grants. Because if you write grants, you get free money that you can use on programming.
Does every town have that?
Well, that, right, grant, right, well, that puts it within the contractor
What was the
sort of bucket of grant writer, right? That's
Yeah,
not a full-time
Hire a
employee.
contract person for a year to
Right.
write grants, get the grants, and then do even more good things with it.
Do most
Also, I haven't
towns have
seen-
a grant writer?
Most towns do not have a grant writer, but we have the least amount of people in youth and family services of Westboro, Southboro, and Northborough. Southboro has 5, Westboro has 4. It is an impossibility to ask our department to write grants because of how time consuming it is, because they only have one full-time person doing case management and 2 part-time people with all of the different issues that they're dealing with.
How many people are in each town? Like, is it a similar amount of?
Well, Southboro I think is smaller.
Southborough is smaller. Southborough's
And-
population is under 10,000. Westboro is around
Westboro's a little
20,
bigger,
right,
yeah.
between 18 and 20.
It's-
And Shrewsbury's is,
Huge.
because we work with them at St. John's, Shrewsbury's got a full social service infrastructure.
And
It's-
it's just
quite
that
good.
I feel like it's a department that's been ignored for years. Like,
It
there's
is.
so much more that could be done there.
You're right.
So much more. And all the different groups who have talked, they work with Northborough Family and Youth Services. So when somebody needs food, or somebody needs helping hands, or somebody needs Benevolent Fund, there's a relationship there.
All right, we are doing well here. We still have 24 minutes. I have to keep people out late, but.
All right, now I get to clarify.
Yes, right. Thank you for playing by the rules.
So So I was the grant chair for the North Red Foundation for a number of years, and the number of grants that were coming in for things like books and regular things that you would think that would just be in the regular budget was surprising. In addition to sort of mental health and special education grants that were needed. This is pre-pandemic. So I was the grant chair for 3 years, and we were able to grant quite a bit of money to those programs. I was sort of surprised that some of them needed the money, you know, people asking for books, but they work at a school, and it just seems like that should be part of the plan to begin with. So post-pandemic, I feel like a couple things. One, the Education Foundation as well as the PTOs have not been able to hold their regular fundraisers. So there's a sort of a bunch of little stopgaps. So PTO and Ed Foundation were filling in a lot of those places that I would have hoped were covered just because they're important things for our children, especially mental health, but they weren't. But now, because of all the pandemic, those fundraisers were gone, and so there's a lot fewer dollars. And then, you know, most of those events were in person, and then people have, you know, less expendable money right now because of, you know, job loss because of the pandemic also, or sort of like a little waterfall. So I think that some of these issues were already larger than maybe we all knew in terms of mental health, and then adding the pandemic on top of that, I mean, it's a whole different world. So just sort of to Abby's point, to Sherry's point, just keeping that other piece in mind that those dollars aren't there as they were in the past.
Right, so again, just to summarize that, some of the things that were being funded out of budget through organizations like, you know, boosters, PTO, NEF, those funds have not been as robust as in the past years.
Right. Even things like that prom, now they're raising money for 2 prom party things.
Right.
Because the pandemic has caused that situation, so there's sort of a lot of that.
Sure.
I just want to tag on, I don't know how many people know here that the majority of the Chromebooks that are used by our students in the schools were funded by NEF, through an NEF fundraiser that happened, and that was 5 or 6 years ago now, so that's how old those Chromebooks are. But we bought all of the Chromebooks for the middle school, and a couple of carts at each elementary school, and a bunch for the high school. So that's not coming out of our town budget.
Or out of the school's initial budget necessarily, right? Other critiques, priorities, questions that need to be considered?
I just have a question.
Sure.
Do you know who owns the dilapidated properties down on Ridge Road on Bartlett Pond? And why are they allowed to? And why do we buy that land?
Talk about that.
It's, yeah, it's being sold, it's
Oh.
trying to be sold.
All those little
It's eventually, if it gets passed.
It's a trust.
Oh,
Yeah.
so it's a long time
It's gonna
coming.
be a long process. Could be.
But that fits into, or it was mentioned, right? Town land purchase and those types of things are.
That would be nice waterfront property. I could see it all, brewery.
I just don't know how many we need.
Yeah, so I would like to suggest that maybe a priority list of a general, it came out in the talk a little bit, a general highlight. I would personally say something sustainable, which can be sustained over a long time, which maybe create revenues, and something to show. That means something which stays also longer time as just a program or for many, many years to come.
So again, something sustainable that we can carry with us for many years should be a priority, and something that we can all look at and say, that's where the money went. Awesome.
I just wanted to add support for the mental health issues and addressing those. I do think that's our future. That is what we need to sustain, or making sure kids and families have that kind of support. I understand it's very difficult to find therapists right now, and whatever creative programming can help to really effectively get kids socialized and kind of fill the gaps that were created during the pandemic. that's our future, that's what we're gonna be paying a lot more for later if we don't take care of that, as early as we can and as soon as we can after this pandemic. So I think just scoping for those ideas out there in the community would be great. I also want to second the idea of sustainability by using this already committed funding for things that build energy infrastructure. We save tons of money over time. I mean, Westboro in 1 year is recovering their investment in, I'm forgetting now what it is, sorry, they spent, okay, so 91,000 has been achieved in utility bill savings for $62,000 invested, and they're recouping that every year. So really, to think very deeply about our energy commitments, what we're spending to heat, what we're spending on municipal budgets, and in the way that we can invest some of this money to ensure that we are really saving our town a lot of money in the long run.
Everybody was isolated for 2.5 years, and everybody has some story of something suffering in their lives. And there are lots of things that we have in this town, maybe not done large enough to try to help people, but now we have a larger need. I'd like to see whatever extra funds are available to really focus on the individuals, the people in our town, and what needs to be done to help them right now, because this has been a tough time for kids, for the elderly, for parents working at home. There's been a lot of stress. And I think if we can embrace that thought, we probably could really get a good jump start on this.
We still have 15 minutes. You don't have to make up critiques if you don't need to. Again, Carolyn?
I haven't critiqued anything.
Okay, I'll work my way over there.
I think helping the people is kind of a no-brainer. I mean, how can a human being not want to do that right out of the chute? I think helping the needy, whether they're kids or people with problems or seniors, that's something, and if we can't do it by hiring people, then put all the short money into whatever infrastructure or help or tools or food or whatever things they need, and then the people can then, the expense of running those programs can be reduced because we put the money in the infrastructure, so now there could be money available for the people because we put everything else in place, so that's the only other cost available. So that there may be a way for us to do that without that long-term repeating investment, which is, kind of frowned upon to have anything that's dragged out. You couple that with a lot of people were talking about, not just the needy, but people going out of business or hurting business, or how do we get our money back? That ties directly to the master plan in improving the downtown, because all of a sudden, if real businesses come here and they can get more business because it works, then that picks that piece up as well. And again, it can be done with the infrastructure so that they're not the recurring payments, because we've got this one shot to use this money in a way that wants to last a long time. So whether it's buying the land or getting a bigger building to help with the needy, or stocking up the food, or get whatever it takes, the shelves or ways to process things simpler, then the only expense we would have is the people. And I think you pick the businesses up, you're not gonna get people to move downtown if they can't do business. So you said, we wanna come here, but if you can't walk to the barber shop or the deli or the beauty salon, you're not gonna go. So I think part of that would bring the businesses, and then everybody wins. Everybody picks everybody up.
We're doing well.
I was just gonna say, I think one of the best ideas that somebody brought up, and I actually don't remember the specifics of it, but somebody had said hire a consultant to come into the town and look at all the different departments to prioritize needs and assess needs. Well, who said that? Is that person still here?
It was kind of over in that corner this way.
Yeah, Yeah, I just,
I think it was,
I think that's like a
Sue,
great
yeah,
starting
summarizing
point.
Sue over, some of Sue over.
It was Tim.
Yes, it was Tim.
He said.
He also wanted a brewery.
Yeah. He said it in specifically about the DEI stuff, though.
Yes,
The DEI
yeah.
committee recommended it, and I think what you're saying is to look at the needs.
Slowly. Yeah. So
And
for
help us.
example,
Yeah.
they might say there's a gigantic hole in the youth and family services
Yeah.
that no one's ever, that really needs to be filled, you know?
Well, we can say that.
Without rating.
Yeah, true, but no one seems to be listening to that. So if there was a
There might be
consultant
no-
that came in
or
and
not
gave
an independent
feedback.
consultant, that was the.
Yeah, or again, interestingly, like a consultant might sort of say, well, if this money is here and this money is here, then you can use this here, and, you know, that kind of stuff, so.
There was also the Economic Development Committee, which is also,
I said that.
also a consultant, yeah, you have both in it, yeah.
I'm just wondering, I don't know about it for the under 10 million, I've only looked at ARPA for, I'm looking at it with $88 million, so, but what are the reporting requirements for this? Because I know for the majority of it, you have to, the federal government will audit the town, so do we still have that for under, for just the 4 million?
Yep.
So there are recording on, there are reporting
Yeah,
on
yeah,
it.
the town would need to, I don't know the details about, the mechanics about how it works, but yes, we need to tell them what we've spent the money on.
Mostly I just wanted to second what, I didn't turn around to see the woman in the back talking about, the mental health issues that our children are facing is just gonna snowball. What's happening with our junior kids going to high school, kindergarten coming up, anything we can do there is going to help, not just them, but our future overall. And I kinda wanna link that, and I don't even know if this is true, but the idea of music and art potentially being cut.
Right, yeah.
You know, if we can get some of that funding for things like that, so that these programs that are already existing, we can keep them going as a way of something that the kids can do that aren't learning, you know, reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Yeah, and that may be like one of those big questions to ask too, is can it be used for school funding, or are schools receiving supports from the federal government in other ways, so.
I can answer that. Yes, they can receive it. Because I'm on the school committee, on the Northborough Southborough Regional School Committee, and if you know, Proctor is getting it for their
Right.
drainage. So yes, and you can get it for, you know, grants for the schools and things like that. Much in the way of like small business development grants, or things like a small for the plug the hole for the music supplies, things
Right.
like that. So.
Thank you, Karen. Norm, again?
This is a question. This is a basic question.
Sure.
Sometimes we're talking about $4 million, and I'm looking at this list, and I see an ARPA dollar value of $2,258,000. What's the number we're actually dealing with here? Because the CIP is something, that's a different thing altogether.
4.5. Half is coming now and half is in May.
So that's the number, but it's not on, it's nowhere on here.
No.
So that's why I'm confused. Got it. Thank you.
Clarification is part of the critical phase. Mitch?
Taking off my nerd hat for a second. We've talked a lot about things that Northborough can do, and Northborough maybe should do. Some issues that we've talked about tonight might be reasonable to approach regionally. Mental health issues and social service issues, we're a relatively small town compared to some around us. There are also smaller around us. It may be, some of these things might be worthwhile for folks in Northborough to talk to folks in Southborough or Westborough or anywhere in the area and see, okay, how can we collaborate on this together? It might not make sense, for example, to bring in a consultant or an outside agency to help with something just for our population. It may make more sense or get better bang for the buck doing it regionally. There are also recreation opportunities to do things regionally. The Bewalt Bike Trail was mentioned on the list. That's a bike trail that's already been drawn that goes, I think it goes all the way from Rhode Island up to New Hampshire.
What
And-
does City Walk stand for?
I have no idea.
Austin Airline Trail. That's
Thank you.
that's a very small portion of what is a much larger network
Yeah.
of trails.
Yeah, so Westboro, I believe, is working on the construction of it now. I think they've funded some of the work, and it stops right at the Northborough line. And then there's a pencil drawing across Northborough in specific locations that then picks up with work that's already being done in other towns. And some of that goes up to Hudson and points north. That's a region, that would be something that we would do locally but have regional impact. So looking at regional solutions to problems may make a lot of sense with some of this money.
Can I just add one thing? I think regional is awesome. I just want to stress that at Northborough Youth and Family Services, that would require somebody to have the hours to work regionally with other
Yes.
people. And right now, I don't see that capacity there. So we would need at least somebody to be there for a year to help collaborate and form these regional things. Because without the capacity of an actual person,
Yeah, my assumption
Those
is
regional
that
things
a lot of these regional approaches would have to be funded by multiple towns. You might be able to, you might have some need where an expert, you don't have enough justification to hire an expert just for Northborough, but maybe Northborough and Southborough shared might justify that.
Again?
Yeah, Sherry's concerns, it seems as if it's come out that you definitely need a grant writer, even for a short-term period. And that person could go and do a regional kind of thing through a consultation. So it sounds like that's a big need within that
Yeah.
department.
and I don't want to say me, I'm just the committee person in town, but the two women that are working there now, I give them so much credit. I do not know how they are doing what they are doing with the hours that they have.
Well, they'd be very proud of how passionate you are in supporting them.
All right, so I have my watch at about 3 minutes now. And again, just from a process standpoint, what Marilee, from a process standpoint, right, one of the things that I think is very important is, in education speak, we call a sort of a summative assessment, right? So when you have 18, 20, 18-year-old boys in front of you and you've just done great work and great ideas have been generated, and then you say, all right, what did you take from this class? And then you get the blank stare, right? That's because you as a teacher didn't do the summative assessment at the end. The procedure for the summative assessment is essentially going to be everyone was given a couple of sticky notes. And what we're asking people to do is to, as you have listened to the ideas, as you've listened to the categories, right, is to just take your sticky note and put it on, how many sticky notes did you give, Marilyn?
3.
3. Put your 3 sticky notes on the areas where you think, hey, this is a priority, this is a need that should be considered with the ARPA funding, right? And the hope there is Northborough Guide will share that information with the select men and women in terms of saying, in this forum, this is kind of where some of the energy was going in terms of the ARPA funding. Now, we're going to have one request and one wrinkle on it. The request would be, if you're super passionate about something, instead of putting all 3 of your sticky notes on it, feel comfortable to put like a number 1 on your sticky note, or a number 2 and a number 3, or something like that, right? So that, so that we do get a sense of, right, that, hey, look, we understand there's lots of needs, there's lots of dreams, there's lots of things that we could use this money for. So if you do want to prioritize like 1, 2, 3 on your sticky notes and you have a pen, that's kind of a good way to sort of express your priorities as well. Does anyone?
Does the top of the sticky note, the note where you're voting, like what if it goes into the next line?
Categories, yeah. Right, so for example, right, the mental health has only like 3 things on it, but that doesn't mean that we spent a lot of time sort of talking about different manifestations
of this, right? So you don't have to put it on a particular line. If you want to write a little note, I mean, you can do that. Leslie, do you want mine? Go ahead.
I just want to briefly explain, I'm Leslie Retier, Board of Selectmen. In case you're wondering why we're not participating, it's because we have to be very careful not to be in violation of open meeting law. Because there is a quorum, over a quorum of us here, so there are 4 of us here. So we have to be very, very careful, but I don't want that to be misconstrued as we're not listening, we're not participating, or we don't want to, anything like that. So I just want to explain that briefly. That's why I'm not putting my stickies up there, because it would be inappropriate, because we will ultimately be deliberating on these. So it's not really something that I can do and go up there and put down my favorites at the moment. So I just wanted to let everybody know that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. That's helpful for those of us who aren't familiar with things like open forum laws, or open meeting laws.
And just to add one detail to that is appropriate to mention, ARPA funds are spent and determined by the Board of Selectmen. So most town revenue goes to town meeting for appropriation. The federal government, because they want this spent, and some of it spent quickly, is they want the local boards of selectmen or city councils or whatever the form of government is to do that. So it is appropriate, and I appreciate the fact that the board is here in Mass. I think that's important, so thank you.
4 out of 5 of us, I think.
Yeah.
Sure.
And one note, because this is being recorded and by Northborough Cable and going to be put up on the YouTube channel tomorrow, I want to make sure that they know that you can't be here putting your sticky notes up, but you can always email, and this goes for everyone in the room too, email the selectmen with your ideas or priorities. It's, correct me if I'm wrong, but selectmen, N-E-N, @town.northborough.ma.us.
It's on the website too. There's a form on the website.
And there's a form on the website, so.
It's very easy.
It goes to all of us.
Awesome. So I think that's a great way to sort of end this portion of the evening. Again, hopefully you'll participate in our summary exercise here. I would really appreciate that. Thank everybody for, I think there's a lot of political division out there in the world, but this felt really great tonight, so thank you very much.